So my name's David Darg. I'm the co-founder of Riot, the first news site where every single story has an action associated with it. And how did I get to that place? I was born here in America, but at the age of 4, was whisked away to the Middle East by my parents, who are journalists. And so I grew up in the Middle East for about 6 years. My parents were TV anchors, and so I was exposed to Middle Eastern culture and the world of journalism as a young child. And then I moved to England and ended up living in a place called Herefordshire in the middle of nowhere in the city of Hereford, where I went to a boarding school. It was like a very Harry Potter-esque, the Hereford Cathedral School. And I was a boarder there living at school while my parents continued to be journalists in Africa. And I got to travel if it was like Christmas or summer holidays or something like that. I would go to Africa and be with my parents. So again, as a young child, I was exposed to the Middle East and all over Africa. And so I really caught that bug for traveling and for adventure and for seeing the world through a particular lens. And so after university, I moved straight into the journalism world, into filmmaking, and started going to Africa to make films on behalf of different nonprofits. And that it was there that I was really exposed to the work of aid organizations and nonprofits, and I kind of fell more in love with seeing how they could do good and help people. I fell more in love with that work than making the films, and so I moved into a role with a nonprofit working in Africa. But it was interesting because I had this sort of dual role of being able to implement projects on the ground and coordinate logistics for relief, but at the same time still had that skill and journalist background as a filmmaker. And so I could go into a situation and help coordinate the relief project, but also tell the story. And that became very important to me and to my role working for various different nonprofits was storytelling. And that nonprofits struggle so often with raising funds and trying to get support for their cause, and without strong storytelling and letting the donors know how their money's making an impact, it's very difficult to do that. And so over the course of 10 years, I really honed that skill of being able to tell a story quickly, because I moved into the disaster relief arena, and I started coordinating a lot of disaster missions and traveling all over the world for emergency response. And so I've been to many earthquakes. I spent a year living in China after the earthquake there. Most recently, I was in Haiti for 3 years after the earthquake there. And so, conflict zones, natural disasters, that's really what I was into. And so, on the ground, coordinating relief projects, but also telling stories and giving a voice to the voiceless, and capturing those moments to relay the information back to the donors to say this is what you can do to help. And through all that, um, I saw failure in the system. And in Haiti, I started working with my co-founder of Riot, Bryn Mooser, and he and I were telling stories, making films together. We started making short documentaries. The last three have done really well on the film festival circuit. We've premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival. We've had a lot of great success with these stories, which are stories about social injustice and really important messages about cholera in Haiti and that type of thing. And we both got frustrated with how difficult it was to get people interested or engaged in what we were trying to do through these films. And we saw a real failure in that people just, they don't care enough on any given day to engage with the subject of cholera in Haiti, for example, or if you're drilling wells in Ghana. It's hard to get people interested in that because they're tough subjects, they're difficult, they're heavy subjects, and people care more about what's happening in the news, for example. And so we started really looking at new models. If we can't get people fully engaged in what we're trying to do in the humanitarian realm and through the stories we're telling, how can we get people engaged? What are they interested in? And so in looking at those models of what people really are engaged in every day, we realized that news is the number one thing that people turn to. It's the thing that you talk about with your colleagues around the water cooler at work. It's the thing you share on Facebook, whether it's world events, breaking news, or just viral videos. The news that we consume each day is the fuel of our connectivity. And so we realized that if somehow we could harness that and flip it the whole model backwards and use news to capture people's interest and then somehow relate the content of those news stories through to causes and good work happening around the world. That it would be something that had never been tried before, and hopefully something that would capture people's interest and just maybe if they're interested enough to read a story or click on an article, maybe they'll be interested enough to take the next step and find out something more about how they can become a part of the story. And so we're really excited about what Riot is pioneering in the news arena because it's the first time anything like this has been done where news is linked to action and that the news is the force that's driving action rather than the other way around, trying to get people interested in sometimes obscure actions. We're saying, well, what are you interested in? And then linking that backwards to an action.
Fantastic. It's really exciting, Dave. What's the future going to be for Riot.org? What have you got in the plans for the rest of this year and in 2014?
Well, there's an exciting future ahead for Riot. We're working on lots of new technology on the back end to where it's a much more interactive experience. That's the really exciting thing about Riot is that news has existed on this very singular plane since the beginning of time. The first time the caveman banged two rocks together and that became news, right through to the advent of newsprint and newspapers, and even today on the Daily Mail website, news is a one-way flow of information from the writer to the reader, and the story ends with the full stop. And what Riot's doing is saying news shouldn't be that. News about a crisis, for example, news about the crisis in Syria, should not end with a full stop. We don't think it's okay for journalists to say this is the bad thing that's happening in this part of the world and not say this is what you can do about it, because technology has allowed us to be this globally connected community, and we know that all these solutions exist. There are great organizations working in Syria, working in Lebanon and Turkey, the surrounding countries, to help the refugees. So why is it okay to report on the crisis but not report on the solution? And so that's what Riot's doing. It's saying, there's a new form of news, there's a new way of doing things. And so through this model of connecting news to action, we feel that we're completely revolutionizing and pioneering the news model, similar to how MTV really revolutionized music in a way. Music existed on a very singular plane. It was an oral experience up until MTV came along and said, wait a minute, you can add this completely new dimension to music through music videos. And so that's really what we feel we're doing at Riot. We're adding a new dimension to news of interactivity. And with that, it's very important to us that our news content is strong, but also that our actions are extremely strong. And so what we're doing is, we curate the best possible actions that we can. Through our experience as aid workers over the last decade, we have an incredible network of nonprofits all over the world. We're very tuned in to who's doing what, where, and how effective the work that they're doing is. And so we want people to know that when they come to Riot, that the actions that we present are the best possible actions for every situation. And we're really looking for transformational impact in the organizations that we connect to and the work that we're doing. And so we're building a lot of really interactive action pages on the back end. So pretty soon we're going to be a great source of places of actions to where you can come to Riot, get your news. But if you want to do good, you can also find a whole slew of different causes and subjects that you can become activated and engaged in the field. And we're also creating some really clever and interactive ways that you can, to get to the actions, to engage in the actions, so that it's a very interactive experience. And we're also going to be syndicating our actions to where it's not just Riot where you can take action on every story, to where you can take the code from our back end and plug it into any blog.
Wow.
Because we want to spread this model around to where other news sites, other blogs can say, okay, this is the content of my article. I want to take that a step further and allow my reader, if they feel so inclined, to act upon that emotion that they've just felt. Because news, it generates emotions. If I read about Syria, I'm angry. If I watch a viral cat video, I'm happy. And it's important to capitalize on those emotions rather than just let them go to waste. And a lot of young people have given up on reading the news because they just feel frustrated. They read all of this depressing stuff and they say, this I'm out. I can't handle this anymore. and they stop reading the news and they turn to whatever else. And so we're trying to bring young people, especially here in the US, back into the news fold and say, hey, news doesn't have to be depressing because there's always a solution to every story. And so through syndicating the actions and offering the actions to other blogs, we hope that the Riot news model and actions really can spread into all sorts of different fields. So we're really excited about that.
It's fantastic, Dave. It's hugely inspirational to hear what you're doing, and I can't wait to see what's around the corner for riot.org. Thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.